So good morning, everybody. I'm happy to have Aurelie Beauvais with us today, this morning, Policy Director of SolarPower Europe, who will give us an overview of the European Green Deal. I mean, we are living in exciting times, not only since COVID-19. There was already the IEA General Secretary noticed that the solar power is the big thing for the future. He came away from the oil and said that no more nuclear power plants. We need solar until 2050. We need a green economy, and there's a big shakeup in Europe now. Was already starting at last year with a new commission. And now with COVID-19, this has gotten a new perspective. And so I'm very happy that Aurelie Beauvais will give us an introduction to that. Aurelie has been working with European affairs for quite some time, until last year for the French Union of Electricity Providers. And I'm very happy that she's now stepping strongly towards the solar field and is supporting us. So Aurelie, it's all yours.
Yes, Jan, thanks a lot. So until 3 years, just correcting that, but
Okay.
but thanks a lot for the introduction, and looking forward to your questions afterward, because as you said, so we are indeed living very exciting times with quite impactful developments in the past months and years since the beginning of the new European Commission, so the new European mandate under the impulse of Ursula von der Leyen with this whole European Green Deal proposal, and obviously with the latest developments due to the COVID-19 crisis, which have surprised everybody and are definitely introducing some changes in the policy landscape as we see it. And so what I will discuss later on with you and the audience, hopefully, is whether it is a deal breaker or a game changer for our industry as we see it. Just starting by introducing very quickly SolarPower Europe, our association. So we represent over 200 companies and organizations which are from the solar sector and active across the whole value chain in Europe. So we are the European Trade Federation of the solar industry. And we work, so you can see here a description of the various areas of activities of our members, really across the whole value chain. And we have, as you can see, well, different categories of membership, but basically everyone that should be there is here in the association. Our services are mostly the 5 pillars which you see here, but I will focus on the 2 first ones, which are actually the ones which are mostly in my remit: influence and intelligence. So what we do as an association is really to monitor how the political and market landscape is evolving, and to really inform our members and company on these changes so that they can anticipate them and integrate this in their strategy for the deployment of their business. Obviously, a big part of our work, while 1/3 of all European legislation today comes from our national energy regulation, are 1/3 of it directly imposed by the EU. So we are working very hard to make sure that this very first step, which is the European decision, is being well thought, triggering then a sound national framework for everyone. So in terms of the moments that we are living in, the European Green Deal is the big program that was presented by Ursula von der Leyen, so the president-elect of the European Commission. It is her legacy, but it's not already done, but that's the legacy that she wants to leave, which is the most ambitious, basically, climate program that was ever laid out at European level, with a clear objective to achieve climate neutrality and become the first climate neutral continent by 2050. This is a very ambitious goal, and it will require all our resources, as well as, indeed, as you said, much more solar. So we do have a very good, let's say, we are very optimistic that solar energy can really, in fact, be a key driver to achieve this climate neutrality commitment. Just to show you two little graphs that are extracted from our global market outlook, which was released 2 weeks ago. So it is clear from our perspective that solar energy is emerging as an undisputed cost leader across all energy sources, but also amongst renewables themselves. So we have seen, for example, very impressive bids for solar in 2019 below the 2 cent per kilowatt hour milestone. And what was very interesting is that not only these bids were extremely surprising, but also it was very well distributed across the world. So it is no longer something which we would see only in the Emirates. The 3 awarding bids, which were the most impressive cost-wise, were located in Brazil, in the Emirates, but also in Portugal, with the latest bid won by Accio Energy. So that's very good, because we see that solar energy is really becoming competitive everywhere. And we had a conversation not so long ago with a representative from the European Commission that was surprised that we could get interesting prices for solar in Lithuania because it was a bit too north. And so we still need to communicate a lot on that actually solar is becoming a competitive option everywhere. Just on the right side, one thing I wanted to show is also that in terms of LCOE, we were very positively surprised this year to see that we are reaching maybe another milestone where utility scale PV plus storage becomes competitive with gas peakers. So that's what we see here. And that is also another milestone which we see will be quite important in the way forward towards a climate neutral energy system, and to also establish renewables as a source of flexibility in the very near future. So in terms of growth in the EU, the solar sector is now ramping up extremely fast. So in 2018, we had already a growth of over 100% for our sector. In 2019, we see this growth being really strongly pursued. And now the big question is 2020. So from now to 2023, even 2024, according to our regular forecasts, we would have added more than 20 gigawatt a year. That is still a forecast which we would have for this year up to 22 gigawatt. But the big question here is what you see in the little red dot, which is basically potentially the low scenario of our European market outlook, which was released in December 2019. And this is what could be the impact of COVID-19 on the European market in 2020. However, this is only provided that we do not have accurate policies in place. And this is why I will tell you more afterwards on the Green Deal and the European Recovery Plan. But if we exclude this drop, which is going to be impactful in the market, we do see really an extremely bright future in terms of installed capacity, which is likely to be exponential. Just one last shot to come back on the role of solar as we see it in a climate neutral energy system. So these are 2 graphs which are extracted to our 2050 study, 100% renewable Europe, which was looking at a 100% renewable pathway to achieving climate neutrality by 2050. And here we see 2 things that we thought very interesting. First, that as you can see here, as of 2040, solar really emerges according to our modelings as the prime energy source in Europe for electricity, but also for the production, for example, of electrofuels. So which is why we are looking with a lot of interest in the current hydrogen strategy as part of the European Green Deal. So that is one very interesting finding. And the second one is the cost bit, which you see on the right, where in fact you also see that a 100% renewable scenario can be extremely competitive compared to others. And so the laggard, which is the blue line here, is basically the business as usual. And the yellow line, which is the leadership, means we achieve climate neutrality even as soon as 2040 with 100% renewable. And what's very interesting is that it almost costs the same than doing nothing in terms of societal costs. And if you look at the orange line, which is basically the even already very ambitious scenario, but which is achieving climate neutrality in 2050, we see that it's even cheaper than doing nothing. So these are two very good reasons from our perspective to really go for more solar in the next months and years in Europe. And so obviously from our perspective, the European Green Deal is going to be a very important milestone. So the European Green Deal is a lot of things. So I decided for the discussion this morning to really focus on 3 initiatives. The first one is the Clean Energy Package for all Europeans. The second one, the Energy System Integration Strategy, which I named Renewable System Integration Strategy. And the third pillar is about industrial strategy. So the first thing that the European Green Deal will have to do, and which will be very important for our sector, is to go beyond the Clean Energy Package for all Europeans. So the Clean Energy Package, for those that might remember, was this big piece of European legislation to put in place a new market design, but also put in place new targets for the deployment of renewable energies in Europe. So notably the Clean Energy Package, which was adopted at the end of 2018, enacted a target of 32% renewable energy in Europe's energy mix by 2030. The non-retroactivity of support schemes for renewable, which was very important, demanded to simplify the administrative procedures for the deployment of renewable installations all across Europe, as well as enabling framework for new business models such as self-consumption and PPAs. And the thing is that the Clean Energy Package is far from being implemented today. And we still believe that with European targets, we need an extra push to have this really materialized at national level. When we discussed with our companies whether what they needed from us, did they need it from us to promote a very ambitious target at 2050, for example, or to promote very ambitious CO2 regulation by 2030, the first answer we got was that what we need now is really to get the ball rolling at national level. And so it means going beyond legislation into very concrete proposals for enabling frameworks all across the countries. So what we would like to see from the European Green Deal, for example, is concrete programs for rooftop solar, which is a heavily untapped opportunity today in Europe. 680 terawatt hour, according to the European Commission, could be seized only using cost-efficient roof potential. We need to see a European permitting initiative. I mean, permitting is simply not happening today to the pace it should across countries if we were to reach our 2030 targets only. So I'm not even mentioning climate neutrality. And we would like to see, and we call for as well, a new approach to utility scale solar. So we need to work with society in order to enable the development of those large-scale installations, which are absolutely needed in a climate neutral economy. There is no way we will be able to achieve that in a cost-efficient way without rolling out utility scale. So the question is how? How do we tackle the infrastructure? How do we work with society and get these programs done? So that will be one very important element of the European Green Deal. So we're likely to see flagship initiatives or flagship implementation initiatives in the near future. And one thing that I don't mention here is a European tendering mechanism, which is called the Renewable Energy Financing Mechanism, and which is on the way as well as one of the follow-up of the Clean Energy Package to finance additional renewable capacities as soon as 2021. The second bit, which is very important, is the energy system integration and hydrogen strategy. So that's another big cluster of the European Green Deal. And here, the objective is really to go beyond the power sector. So first, expand the power sector to other sectors. That is what they call energy system integration. And this is notably achieved through the electrification of key sectors such as transport, building, and industry were relevant, and that will help us bring renewables not only in the power sector, but outside of the power sector to decarbonize transport and buildings, notably, and also change transport and building sectors into flexibility resources, for example, or renewable generation resources. So that's a very important pillar, which we will have on the 8th of July. And we have the clean hydrogen strategy also coming on the 8th of July, which here is going to look at beyond the power sector. How do we power renewable electrofuels, and how do we make it an industrial success story for Europe? So really watch the space, because hydrogen is going to play a role. And in fact, if we have a clear commitment towards 100% renewable hydrogen, it could be also a huge market opportunity for solar as we see it. So at the moment in the document, we're talking about creating massive hydrogen hubs with gigawatt scale production facilities with of renewable hydrogen through electrolysis. The European Commission mentioned hydrogen valleys. It is likely that we will see quotas established, for example, for big energy intensive users, and market design proposals, for example, for cross-border trade of hydrogen or access of infrastructure. This is all going to come together with the review of the Trans-European Network for Energy regulation, which is going to be very important to basically define the appropriate infrastructure that we need. And here the big battle is the balance between electricity grids and repurposing gas pipelines. So that's all very relevant topic for our sector going forward. So what we need basically here is really to have a right focus in the sequence of action. So today, the ready solution is renewable electricity. And to achieve this potential, we need more electricity grids and we need more renewables overall. So we hope very much that the energy system integration strategy will incorporate that. And so far, that is what we see. So that's very positive. We need to accelerate the deployment of decentralized flexibility sources and electrification across all sectors, which is going to be part of the energy system integration strategy. And when it comes to the hydrogen strategy, we need really to have a clear choice towards renewable hydrogen in order to unlock the market opportunities for our sector. So watch the space, it's coming in 1 week time. Finally, when it comes to the Green Deal, an industrial strategy, that's the last pillar, and it echoes nicely with what we have seen very recently in the frame of the COVID crisis. So basically, in the Green Deal, there is also an acknowledgement that the European Union needs to be more strategic when it comes to key technologies, and the communication of the Commission on Industrial Policy on the 10th of March did acknowledge the need to have a more strategic approach to renewable industry. So here we would like, so what has been announced is an industry forum that will be established in September 2020, and we'll have to identify so-called key European industrial ecosystems on which the EU will then focus its effort to develop a robust industrial policy, encourage, for example, industrial scale-ups programs, and fund R&D, notably. And we know that there will be a dedicated strategy to green energy-intensive sectors, such as steel, cement, and chemicals, where hydrogen is likely to play a key role, which is another good reason to go for renewable hydrogen. Here, what we need to see from the Green Deal, and this is not yet fully confirmed, even though we see very good progress in the Commission, Parliament, and government side, we need to have renewable industries acknowledged as a strategic industrial ecosystem. That means supporting as well the solar industry and manufacturing in Europe. So we have created in SolarPower Europe the Solar Manufacturing Accelerator, which is a big platform trying to help project developers, manufacturing project developers to achieve the last mile and achieve industrial development. So far, we have more than 20 projects gathered, amongst which some of them more than 5 at gigawatt scale across Europe. So that's very good, but we do need to see appropriate political support there. And we need as well to support the export of know-how which we have in Europe, with a sound policy towards emerging markets. And this is something we will see in what is called the Green Deal diplomacy, and which is also a very important initiative. So maybe to finish, and then I'm pretty sure there will be a lot of questions. The Green Deal was in December 2019, but then in March 2020, COVID-19 changed everything, putting our economy at a stop during 3 months. And now, 2 weeks ago, the EU came forward with Next Generation EU, which is the recovery plan they propose. And so the big question for us is that basically a deal breaker or a game changer? Is this crisis going to threaten the further deployment of renewables, or on the contrary, accelerate it? And I think I can say very clearly that from our perspective, it's going to be a huge opportunity, in fact, quite unprecedented, because now we have this big tool, Next Generation EU, which is 1.1 trillion of money altogether in the EU budget, and 750 billion out of this budget that are singled out for the recovery plan to be spent between 2021 and 2024. So that's a huge amount of money that's going to be poured into the economy. And you can see here the 3 pillars of this program. So first, it is really the recovery and resilience facility. This one is going to be extremely interesting for us. I will tell you more in the next slide, but basically, it's going to be the National Energy and Climate Plan version of the recovery plan. So member states will need to lay out very clearly how they will spend their money, and they are bound by the European criteria to spend it either on the green or digital transition, with a very big focus on this. The Just Transition Fund has been doted with 30 extra billions. So that's going to be very good for us too. We have a second pillar, which is for incentivizing private investment, with notably the Invest EU upgrade, which is going to help for infrastructure and strategic investment facility. I will tell you more very shortly. And a third pillar to support research and global outreach. So I just have 2 last slides to tell you where we see the concrete opportunities in the Next Generation EU. The recovery and resilience facilities, as I said, is going to be supporting public investment and member state reforms. It's going to help member states to pursue their reforms, notably regarding the energy transition, whereas they are heavily impacted by the crisis. So member states will need to develop recovery and resilience plans as soon as October 2020 to explain how they would like to spend this huge pot of money from the EU. And these plans have to be aligned with the national energy and climate plans. So we see this, for example, as a very good opportunity to boost the deployment of utility scale projects, having additional tenders, for example, as it has been done in Malaysia, or specific state programs to boost corporate PPAs, like we have seen it in the recovery plan in Japan. We could also see massive rooftop solar programs, either at city level or government level, and infrastructure upgrades being financed through this money. The second in the Invest EU is going to be a de-risking tool, which will help financing 2 big pillars. First, the strategic European investment facility will likely be a very interesting tool to finance manufacturing activities for solar in Europe. And the sustainable infrastructure window, which is going to be doubled, is likely to be a very nice push for electricity grid upgrades at distribution and transmission level, as well as the rollout of flexibility sources. The solvency support instrument is an instrument that is going to kick in really in the very short term, as soon as autumn 2020. And it's going to help companies that have been, let's say, short-term impacted by the pandemic to keep afloat until conditions are getting better. So these companies will have to be viable companies, but any solar companies that have been impacted by COVID-19 and is facing a conjunctural liquidity issue, for example, can actually benefit from this fund. And the last one is going to be the Just Transition Fund, where we do see a very strong opportunity to finance new solar projects in coal local regions, as well as upskilling and reskilling programs. And so we are very confident that, for example, former coal sites could be converted into utility scale facilities with this transition fund, but we could also have dedicated regional programs financed. So that's it. I know it was a lot, so I'm really eager to hear the questions you may have. If you would like to know more, feel free to go on the website of the association and download our European Market Outlook, Global Market Outlook, or our study 100% Renewable Europe. Thanks a lot, and back to you, Jan.
Many thanks, Aurelie, for your talk. You blew everybody away. I don't
Too much.
I don't see many questions. Well, maybe the team can help me if I'm doing something wrong here in the management of the call. I just start with my own observations and questions. You were talking about the 680 terawatt hours of lost opportunities on rooftop. Mm-hmm. What is your concrete ideas, rooftop solar programs? Mm-hmm. Like, would it be that on national level they have to sort of make it basically you have to have solar on a new building? Should it be a regulation basically, or the feed-in tariffs again, which is always a big discussion?
Yeah. So indeed, I mean, the 680 terawatt hour, it's a report from the European Commission, which was published maybe 1.5 years ago, something like that, which made a clear assessment of the rooftop potential in Europe. And again, I insist on the fact that this figure is only if we were to install solar where it makes sense. So it doesn't mean you cover every roof, whatever the surface. It means you just put solar roofs where it makes sense economically, and this is what you get in terms of generation. So indeed, when we are looking at climate neutrality, 680 terawatt hour today, while we speak, that is 24% of Europe's electricity consumption. So that is not nothing, and it is a potential that could be harvested very, very quickly. So indeed, we see that many countries at global level are already taking the lead when it comes to mandatory solar rooftop programs. I mean, we see that happening in California. We see that happening in Australia, where the amount of solar roofs have really exploded. And we do see it as well in some countries in Europe. So, for example, the city of Tübingen in Germany, which has put in place minimum requirements. So
the state of Baden-Württemberg is starting to kick in on that
as well.
Industry and car parks, which is quite important, I think.
Yes, Austria went from a target which was initially 100,000 roof to 1 million roof. So there are many ways to do that. I don't think feed-in tariffs, as we knew it in the past, are going to be the way to do it. First, because the cost competitiveness of rooftop solar installation is also increasing massively. One interesting entry point which we see at European level for that is one initiative I did not mention in this presentation, but that is very important. That is the renovation wave. So the renovation wave is going to be a massive program to finance the renovation of the existing building stock, and existing is important because that is where the potential is hardly untapped. New build usually gets solar on it, but the question is, what do we do with the existing building stock? And so here we expect to have a renovation financing facility put together, and where we would have blended instruments where you can use the same fund and go to the same place, a one-stop shop, whether you want to isolate or put together or put a solar on your roof, for example. Mm-hmm. So we will need to have minimum mandatory requirements. Usually that is something that doesn't go well with member states. So here the question remains open.
All right, the questions are running in. Just to follow up, you mean private industrial, I gather? For the rooftops?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
You meant private and industrial, I guess.
Yes.
That was one question. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And then somebody from Ukraine. How can I be part of the recovery plan?
Well, it depends what type of company you are, but in fact there are many ways. Maybe going into every tool. So the recovery and resilience facility is going to be singled out for the EU 27. So I think this is something where your company, if it is active anywhere in Europe, though, could benefit because it means that every single country in the EU will have extra money to do extra investments in renewables. So depending on the companies or your business, basically, you can definitely surf on that wave. Then the Invest EU will support the establishment of any type of industrial activity in a European country. And I think it's important to say here that it's not necessarily, I think, EU located. It's about investing in Europe. So it means a company that would be from outside of Europe, I think, could benefit from that as long as they invest into something that has impact for a European country. And the Just Transition Fund as well is likely to be extended a bit abroad or outside of Europe, because there is also a regional approach.
Okay. Yeah. Very good. Thank you. Yeah, there was a question whether the video is available. That's more to the organizers of the SOCO conference. I'm not sure. Is anybody there who can answer that?
Maybe it is.
Or do you have it as an email, basically, for somebody who is asking for it? Aurelie, would it be available to pass on via email?
The presentation, yes, yeah. I can.
Sure. Okay. So the people that asked and are part in the talk, maybe just contact the organizers, or there's an info at SolarPower Europe also. I guess there's a few other detailed questions like how do you actually get companies to invest currently when they have much more other things in their heads, like communication companies, IT companies, like any type of companies. Solar is not on their main frame at the moment. So how do you get them to rethink?
I mean, that's the whole point of a smart recovery plan. It's not easy, but for example, one thing in the next generation EU was the implementation of a do not harm principle. So that means first, whatever money you spend, which is coming from the recovery plan, it has to comply with environmental and sustainability requirements. So that's important because it cannot be spent. It's not a white check to any companies. And then, well, that will be more in the national recovery and resilience plans that we will need to see, on the one hand, policies from member states which will support some sectors, but not for free. So that's the exact discussion which we get, for example, for aviation, that aviation has been suffering a lot, and probably they're thinking more about saving their business rather than investing in solar. But the thing is that they're going to have to be refinanced, but with counter guarantees that they will use this finance as well to green themselves. So, for example, in Japan, as I was mentioning, the government put together a state program with state-backed guarantees for PPAs in order to, on the one hand, well, give some money directly to SMEs and companies, but also encourage them to use part of this money to invest in, for example, a CNI rooftop solar installation. So I think, yeah, member states will have to be smart.
It's not being a white check. That's the main deal, basically.
No.
You basically asked, yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Aurelie. I guess time is over.
Yes.
Thanks for your talk. We have gotten a lot of